slides should come up. Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Growthfund. Thank you very much, Vice President. It's a true privilege and an honor to be speaking here. Today, I want to talk to you about progress. And to do it, I want to do it through the book that we just published, which is called A Century of Plenty, A Story of Progress for Generations to Come, of which I have the luck of being one of the co-authors from the McKinsey Global Institute. And the reason why we wrote this book is because today we're in quite pessimistic times. We're a pessimistic bunch. In France, only 6% of people think that the next generation will be better off. And if you go down the list, you'll see that the highest advanced economy is Singapore, at less than a third of the population, and you have to go to China, India, to start seeing numbers that are above 50%. So what we wanted to do with this book is to take a step back and to look at the last 100 years of progress and also have a positive vision for 2100. So I'm going to start talking about hundreds of years of global progress, and then I'm going to bring it to today, and I'm going to bring it to Greece in particular. Economic progress has been fairly rare in the history of humanity. Actually, it was almost inexistent for many, many, many centuries. In the Industrial Revolution, in the 19th century, global incomes rose twice. They went up by 2. But it wasn't until the last 100 years in which they went up by 6 times. GDP per capita globally, on average, went up 6 times in the last 100 years. We had unprecedented growth. And Greece was not below that. Actually, it was above that. So Greece went up 7 times. Now, this wasn't a simple century, of course. But overall, through twists and turns and complications, we always overcame difficulties and kept powering through. And it was not just GDP per capita. It was pretty much any variable we can look into. Life expectancy, and these are Greek numbers, life expectancy went up 34 years. Education, years of schooling, multiplied by almost 5. To me, the most striking one, child mortality, went down from 13%, think about that, 13% of children dying before the age of 5 to almost 0% today. And we did all this, not by working more, but by working less. The average worker today in Greece works 400 fewer hours per year than in 1950, which is the year in which we start having good data. So pretty impressive. How did we do this? We did it thanks to what we call a progress machine. A progress machine is basically an engine that has 8 parts that when they work together, in the times when they work together, they powered the economy forward. And these parts are workers, skills, investment, invention, energy, cities, trade, and markets. In the book, you have the fascinating 100-year story of each of those. Today, I'll just say that if I had to pick one that is particularly important and very related to this conference, is investment. 70 to 80% of productivity growth is driven by increased investment. But that's the past. So let's look at the future now. And let's imagine our grandchildren in 2100. And let's imagine that they look back to today. They look back to 2026. What do they see? Do they see that after all this progress, we just stopped? That in this complicated, pessimistic, complicated times, uncertain, we just stopped? Or do we continue progressing, even accelerating progress? And when you think about it this way, that's a very personal thing, but when you think about it this way, I think it's almost weird to think that we're just going to stop, right? We're almost surely continue progressing. So we do a very, very specific exercise here. We imagine a country that's very prosperous, that's very rich, say above $80,000 per year, that has very good healthcare, very good education, where people trust each other, high trust in government. And we wanted to make this exercise very, very specific. We didn't want this to be a science fiction exercise. So we decided to pick a country that exists, that we've been there, that we think is the closest to that. And that country is Switzerland. Now, you can pick your favorite. You don't have to agree with me that it's Switzerland, but bear with me and you'll see why we picked Switzerland. Basically, what we imagine is a world in which, by 2100, the poorest country in the world, which today, according to the World Bank, is Burundi, gets as rich as Switzerland is today. So imagine a world that in 2100, the poorest country is as rich as Switzerland today, and everyone else is above that. Now, that's not a prediction, of course. That is just a scenario. But it's very useful because it allows us to measure what it would take. And what it would take is the following. It would require an economy, global economy, that is 8.5 times larger than today, and 6 times GDP per capita, which is very interesting because that's exactly what we did in the last 100 years. So actually, this crazy world, when I say Switzerland everywhere, it's weird to think about it, but actually, this world would not even require a massive acceleration. It would be a very mild acceleration from what we've done in the last 100 years. Now, additionally, we can measure the 5 conditions of plenty. And those 5 conditions are having enough energy, enough materials to build this world, enough food to keep nourishing a growing population, enough innovation to accelerate productivity, and doing this within planetary boundaries. I don't have time to go through all of them. They're very detailed in the second part of the book. But the overwhelming conclusion that we reach is that it is perfectly possible to do those. The limits are not physical. The limits are in our choices and in our institutions. All of them are perfectly achievable in our lifetimes. I'm just going to give you a quick example with energy. So this is a chart, one of my favorite charts actually, which correlates GDP per capita, so how rich a country is, and how much energy it uses. And you can see 2 very clear things, I think. One is that there's no such a thing as a rich country that uses little energy. Prosperous economies use a lot of energy. It can be clean. Actually, Switzerland is a good example of abundant clean energy, but it's a lot of it, which leads us to the second conclusion, which is that for all these countries to become much more prosperous, we need a change in mindset. We need an energy transition. We've been talking about it, and it's very important, but we also need an energy expansion. It's not just a transition. How much? Well, we calculate that in this world of plenty, we would need 2 to 3 times more energy globally. But we also want this energy to not just be energy, but to be electricity. We want to electrify it. Today, only 20% of global energy is electrified. And we want this electricity to be clean. So when we put this all together, we need 30 times more clean electricity globally. Now, is that possible? Well, yes, it is. At least there's one country in the world that's growing its energy and electricity faster than this, and that's China. And I know you expected China, but I'm going to give you another example. France in the 70s. France in the 70s, with the oil shocks, decided that it wanted to build a nuclear country. And in 15 years, it built 50 reactors, and it built a nuclear country. So that basically, to me, proves that when we want to build, we build, proves that the limits are in our choices, nor in physics. So let me bring this to Greece, as I promised at the beginning. And my claim here is that Greece has indeed been recovering, but Greece has to go from recovery to plenty. And for that, it needs economic growth, and it needs productivity growth. And of course, there's many conditions to economic and productivity growth, but here today I want to talk about 2 very specific ones that are particularly relevant for this forum, and they're particularly impactful. One is to grow large, productive champions with deliberate investments, which is a long way of saying you need great companies. The second one is not just you need the companies, but you need to compete in the sectors of the future. Why do I say we need great companies? That feels like a bit of a truism, right? Like, of course we need great companies. Who doesn't? But it's more than that. The reason is that large productive companies have an outsized impact to national productivity. And we ourselves, when we did this research at the McKinsey Global Institute, were very surprised with the results. In Germany, 3% of firms explain 80% of productivity growth, of national productivity growth. And we did this for our countries. In the UK, it's 6%. In Spain, which is the highest, it's 8%. So still very few firms explain most productivity growth. But you can even go further. You can go to the most of the most productive. You go to the 30, 50 top firms. That's what we call the standouts. And what we find is that 30 to 50 firms, 3.3, 0.2% of the economy, explain 35 to 50% of productivity growth. Of course, then you have a long tail of companies that have to catch up and all this, and that helps as well. But with very few companies that are true champions, you can go a long way helping your country. Why do we need this? And this has been already said today. We need this because Greek productivity levels, although improving, are still quite low. Greek productivity is 50%, you can see on the right-hand side, 50%, well, left on your case, 50% of the Eurozone, and below its peers. Spain, Italy. I'm Spanish, by the way. So Spain, Italy, Portugal. And for that, we need investment. I've said before that the key to productivity growth is investment. So if we look at the investment profile in Greece, and again, that has been said already, Greece invested 23% of its GDP, very driven by real estate, before the financial crisis. Went down to 11%, and today has recovered to 17%. But on average, if you look at its peers, if you look at the Eurozone, average investment is 21 to 23%. But hey, we're saying that Greece is behind. It needs more investment to catch up. So we calculate that Greece more or less needs between 23 to 25% of GDP to be invested to be in a healthy position. In very simple numbers, that means that if you want to do this by 2030, you need about 15 billion extra investment per year. So you need that to propel your great companies, but you also need, it goes both ways, you need the great companies because they are the ones that have the capacity to make this investment. Now the second leg, I said, is being in the sectors of the future. So here, the best concept to describe it is what we call the arenas of the future. So the arenas are basically the 18 industries that we think have the highest potential in terms of growth and in terms of dynamism and in terms of disruption and innovation globally. And together they have a potential of 50 trillion in revenue. You have some of the usual suspects here. AI foundations, of course, semiconductors, cloud services, but there's much more than that. There's the ones that have to do with electrification. There's the biofrontiers, like pharma-related, et cetera, et cetera. There's the hard tech ones. Today, a lot of innovation is hard tech, robotics, space. And there's the digital ones, which have been going on for a while already, but they still have lots of potential. And so what we did here is select some of the ones, actually the 7, that we think have quite high potential for the Greek economy. And those are semiconductors, cloud services, AI and software services, e-commerce, robotics, space, batteries, and biotech applications. So of course, I don't have time to discuss all of them, but just to give you one quick example, if you think about AI and software services, right? The Greek economy is well positioned, not because it will probably invest the next LLM, the next big Anthropic, say, probably it will not be in Greece or Spain or Italy or any of those economies, but the value chain is much longer. And the adoption of AI and the applications of AI will have a lot of the value there. So if you have an economy with talent, an economy that can adopt AI, an economy that can develop the applications for different industries, all the way from tourism to maritime to all sorts of others like healthcare, you have a great opportunity to capture lots of value. Now, this is a specific example, but it generalizes in Invest Ahead, with the objective to support Greece's ambition to increase investment and to accelerate growth. So what this initiative consists of is to identifying the 30 investment opportunities, given Greece's characteristics, but also the competitive landscape and the real opportunities in different sectors, and testing those opportunities with lots of different market experts, etc. And then narrowing down this list to 10 specific bankable investments that can attract domestic and foreign investment. In a nutshell, need investment opportunities, need investment to move. So to conclude, plenty is a choice. Plenty doesn't just happen. And hopefully, I've shown, to an extent at least, that the opportunity is real, that growth is good, growth is very important, and that there is enough for all, that the limits are not physical. But for this to happen, we need an objective, and we need to invest. We need specific investable opportunities, and we need to invest in them. We need to invest in this future we want to build. And more importantly, it starts with a new story. It starts with a story that is not pessimistic. Pessimism paralyzes us. It starts with a story that is fact-based, but it's optimistic. A story of progress for generations to come. Thank you very much.